All right, we are back for another episode of the HuntStand podcast, live from the National Wild Turkey Federation Convention and Sport Show. These guys got smirks on their face right now because we just started recording this a little while ago and we were having some technical difficulties, so we're giving her another go. Sometimes, similar to research, sometimes you got to just keep trying different things. So this is a big event. We've got upwards of maybe even beyond 100,000 people that'll be rolling through here this week. And it's just nice to be able to take some time to sit in a quiet room and talk turkey and get away from the madness for a minute. So I appreciate you guys being able to take some time out of your schedule. I know it's total madness on the floor. You got people running you down left and right. And so without further ado, I'm here with Phil Lavretsky and Mike Chamberlain, and we're going to talk about a really cool project called Wild Turkey DNA.
Champion, number 9, Hunter.
But before we get into that, I just want to familiarize the audience. Anybody who's listening or watching who are not familiar with you guys, let's just give some cliff notes on who you are and what you're all about. Start with you, Phil.
All right, take two. Yeah, my name's Dr. Philip Lavretsky. I'm a professor at the University of Texas at El Paso, where I run a wildlife genetics lab. We do everything under the sun, where we're capturing animals, birds in particularly, looking at movement behavior, habitat use, and then also doing a bit of habitat assessment, but obviously sprinkling genetics on everything as a foundation. And so I come from a wildlife background, particularly waterfowl, so, working into the edible bird phylogeny with Mike here.
Yeah, turducken.
All right, Mike, how about yourself?
Yeah, so I'm Mike Chamberlain. I'm the National Wild Turkey Federation Distinguished Professor at the University of Georgia. Been in academics over 30 years and study all kinds of critters across North America. I'm an applied wildlife ecologist, so I mentor graduate students and postdoctoral researchers who conduct field research. And although I've studied a lot of things, by far the wild turkey has dominated my research program for the last at least 25 years. So I am focused on conservation and science of the wild turkey.
I've met with a couple different folks this week to record episodes talking specifically about conservation projects and research and biology. And one of the things I continually note is how far we've come on the communication side with all this stuff. With this type of stuff you guys are working on now, 5-10 years ago, a lot of that's just like it didn't see the light of day. There just wasn't a lot of engagement from the public. But with social media and the outreach that you guys have been doing and utilizing tools like Instagram, it has been so cool to see how all this has changed. And now it's become something that, like, so many people are excited about.
Yeah.
Can you talk about how some of that is, how that's changed? Or, I mean, like, how did that, it seems like it just kind of, like, all of a sudden spurred up overnight. I don't know if it was related to downtime with COVID or what was the deal?
100%. Nobody knew who I was prior to April of 2020. I had social media accounts and I followed people and I saw some science being disseminated, but it wasn't much. It was mostly personal, hunting related. And I did a meat eater podcast in 2020 and suddenly we were stuck, right? We couldn't interact with each other and we were starving for information and suddenly fast forward to now and people obtain a lot of information through this type of outreach and this type of forum, and they exchange ideas on social media, and the way we communicate is fundamentally changed forever. And I see that with young people. I see it even with older people who communicate with me via social media that otherwise, prior to a few years ago, they would never have been able to interact with me. It's quite remarkable how things have changed.
Did you guys ever imagine, because I've never seen it, and you would think that it would have happened with the whitetail world more first, but like the way I would equate it is like you guys have gone from more behind the scenes biologists, topics that, generally historically have been kind of dry, and it's always hard to get people to pay attention to that stuff, and it's the core foundation. It's the most important of everything we talk about. Like, we get so fixated on things that are related directly to the hunt. Like, I made a comment in an interview yesterday about how, like, we think about season structures or how many tags we should get, or should people be reaping turkeys and all that. And at the end of the day, like, those details in how we manage the wild turkey and how we make hunting better for turkey hunters, like, those are like a drop in the bucket compared to the stuff that you guys work on. So did you ever think that it would be what I would call like rock star status with like being able to present everything that you guys are coming up with research and all that? Like, it's so cool to see how that has changed. Like,
I can say no. Like, no.
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 Let me give my couple cents. So there's two things that you said: the dryness and the technology. But the technology is not just through media. It's actually the methods that we use for genetics. So the problem with genetics is, everybody thinks of like fruit flies and stuff like that, and that's boring. And most geneticists don't know how to speak to anybody. So that's also a problem. But the other biggest problem is that we used to take years to generate data, right? Somebody would be like, oh, what's this population? So we would generate data, and it would sometimes take 3 years. And at that point, like, the population's changed. But what's happened in the last 5 years technologically for genetics is that something that used to be simple for humans because we had the technology for them, right? We had so many genomes, 23andMe, Ancestry.com, these types of things that have built up these systems, or the system, we didn't have for wildlife even 5 years ago, right? Even as I was doing my own PhD over the last 10 years, we went from things that would take a project I was working on that took me 3 years to gather the data. Once I developed this or optimized this particular project, I now can do in 3 days, right? I can get agency people data within a month. Oh, and this is hundreds of samples. So this opened up the capacity and the ability, right, to be able to get data, get results, and get them into the hands of managers, federal, state, whoever's asking the question. And at this point, the way this sort of was born out is that I was sitting in a duck blind, again, waterfowl, and looking around, and I was scientifically collecting some mallards. And I was like, man, if I could just get some hunters to be excited about this, if I could get an army out there, we could study these species at scales that would be unimaginable, right? If I had to pay that many technicians, it'd be billions of dollars. And so it was actually Duck DNA that was born out of that, with a partnership with Ducks Unlimited. And that sort of piloted. I was like, I don't know if anybody's going to be excited about this or care, but that was huge. And Mike here called me a year ago, almost to the date, so last Super Bowl, more exciting Super Bowl, or I guess that one sucked too. And was like, man, what are these white birds? And I was like, well, this duck DNA thing, duck hunters seem to like it. That we're getting a lot of traction with the hunters through that. Like, why not try with turkeys? Maybe turkey hunters are just as passionate and interested. And I would have to say, turkey hunters take on genetics. Genetics is not an easy concept to really understand and to get that across. But man, the turkey world has eaten it up, and I've been really just impressed with the level of engagement, interest, and just thoughtfulness of hunters. Just like wanting to know, and that's not, you don't see that in every sort of cohort of peoples, right? Not everybody's going to get that or care. So I wouldn't have put $100 on a bet that this was going to be as good as it is.
And I think what happened with specific to turkeys and people embracing science back 5-6 years ago, I think partially was born out of the fact that when COVID hit and we started communicating with each other, people started realizing that the declines that they were seeing in their local flocks were being seen everywhere in all kinds of places. And they started realizing that there were people out there that were talking about it, me and others. And suddenly people started engaging with me through social media that legitimately had questions. And they didn't always buy the answer I would provide, but I think they respected my willingness to engage on social media accounts and to be asked difficult questions and provide answers, and sometimes say, I don't know the answer to that. We don't know. Science is a moving target, right? It's constantly iterative and evolves. And I think what you've seen in the years since is just the turkey hunting community, by and large, embraces the information, and they want to know. They want to be knowledgeable. And I've said this on many podcasts, and I think it 100% is true. Turkey hunters are different. They're just different. They're cerebral.
There's no doubt.
In a way that other hunters are not. And I hunt everything. But turkey hunters think differently about the bird they're chasing. And I think that causes that cerebral curiosity about the bird transcends their entire lives. Like, they think about turkeys all the time. And when and that passion, it becomes obvious when you talk to them about science, and it's cool. I think it's cool.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's turkey hunters have always been, in my opinion, more passionate than any other types of hunters, and I'm the same way. I hunt pretty much everything, and I'm ate up with whitetail hunting and whatnot. But I think about turkeys like every single day of the year, and I'm not even saying that to be funny. So I know the affinity with turkeys is just next level, but you started to dovetail into the genetic stuff. But even just from a general perspective with the engagement and people just wanting this information, I find myself now, like you're talking about how fast you can turn around research, like now when I hear about you guys working on some kind of project, I'm like checking frequently to see, okay, what are the results? What are the, I'm waiting to hear the next thing and the next thing. Like a lot of the stuff that's being done on gobbling and the impacts of hunting pressure and all that kind of stuff. And going through everything that you guys publish, it's pretty amazing the pace at which some of this stuff is coming out. To your point, like, and I didn't think about it that way. I didn't think about how technology has influenced the ability to turn around data faster.
It's huge.
The results.
And also the people. I mean, Phil will tell you this. We are dumpster fire facilitators. Like we're trying to get money. We're facilitating people, and we're trying, literally herding cats. And it's our graduate students and our postdocs and our staff. They're the workhorses. They're the ones that do the work. And you get young people that are truly motivated to do science, and you get the right young people, and suddenly they start pumping out these products, and they enjoy the process of conducting science, and they see the value in it. And so now, through time, you gain recognition, and young people want to come work for you, and you can identify the very best that are out there, and you mentor them and give them the resources they need to do their job, and they want to be rapid with their pace. They want to do rigorous science, and they want to publish it. They want people to talk about it. They want the recognition, and I want to offer them that. And so I try to talk about my research and other people's research, because I want everybody in the turkey hunting community to embrace that work.
Yeah, absolutely. No, what I mean, I echo Mike's thoughts. I come from UTEP. We're building that, but through these kind of like engagements, there are tons of people that are coming to me, right? They're like, I didn't know you could do this with genetics. I didn't know genetics was even possible outside of dinosaurs. No. Yeah, so, and if you want to work on dinosaurs, this is as close as you get.
Oh, yeah. They are dinosaurs. They are.
Yeah. Complex dinosaurs.
They would eat us up if they could.
And
I guarantee it.
The point that I wanted to make is actually you're seeing results faster than what the research community is going to see, because publication process, all these things takes time, right? It takes time to get these things out. But what we're trying to do is basically keep it moving and being like, look what we're finding, and then we're going to put it together in a more scientific method. But keeping the public engaged and understanding the process, as well as the results that are coming out of it. And I know some of the listeners are going to be like, I didn't get my results yet from last year. And
There's
to
a reason
you,
for
there's
that.
a reason. The problem is that turkeys were far more complex than waterfowl, apparently. What's happening on the landscape genetically to turkeys is far more complex than I expected.
Okay, so let's rewind a little bit because we're kind of giving teasers, and there's a lot of people who undoubtedly are listening and watching this who are totally unfamiliar with this wild turkey DNA project. So you alluded to the inception of it. It was a casual phone call on a Super Bowl. I don't know if you're maybe cracking some beers and having some thoughts.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
I mean, I can give you the 30,000-foot view. I saw a bird posted on social media, an odd-looking turkey. And I said to myself, that's not a wild turkey. And so I literally texted Phil and said, hey, man, are you cool to have a 5-minute talk, which ended up being like a 2-hour conversation. And I said, could we do that? Like, if I got you a piece of turkey, could you tell me what it is? Oh, 100%. And so literally within the next 48 hours, we had a logo. We had a partnership. We had Ducks Unlimited on board. We had NWTF on board. We had gotten the Low Country Game Bird Foundation involved, my lab involved. And literally within the next week, we had a podcast planned. We had a launch planned. And I worked almost nonstop on this, trying to facilitate it and get it set up. And it literally, I think within less than a month, we were rolling. We were rolling.
I mean, right, so it's February, so we had to get everything operational by late March to even get the kits out. At that time, we're like, let's just take the duck DNA boxes and slap a wild turkey DNA sticker on that. We just didn't have anything else, and let's see what happens, right? We were like, yeah, 150 samples, that should be all right. And then that just cracked open the turkey rabbit hole.
So it's funny, the way I actually found out about it was super organic. I was in South Florida last year hunting Osceolas and went to a little Mexican restaurant that you've probably been to at some point. And I was with one group of dudes. I was with Paul Butsky, and we were filming a documentary on Paul. And we ran into some of our other mutual friends, Pete Mueller and Brian Lovett, who were down there hunting. And they told me about this. They just kind of dropped a casual comment about it, and I was like, my mind started racing immediately because I was like, I haven't heard about this. Like, is this a public thing yet? And then I kind of just, I went to turkey hunting and forgot about it, and then I started seeing stuff in social media and whatnot. And like a lot of turkey hunters, I geek out on the most minute details of these birds. Like, I just get enthralled by like just goofy stuff. Like when I shoot a bird, like I look at its toes, and I look at like every little physical detail of it and variations and whatnot. And so over the years, I've shot or been in camps with people who have taken birds that have these weird color variations. I shot actually the first Merriam's I shot in western Nebraska. Had a unique color variation to it of some sort. And then I shot another one in Wisconsin, and I've shot them, where they have random colored feathers and this and that. And then I was with a buddy in Wyoming by Devil's Tower a couple years ago, and he shot a bird where it had straight up jet black wings, not just like mostly black, but I'll show you guys a picture at some point. They were straight black. It was one of the coolest things I've seen.
In about 2 weeks, a bird that's identical to that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I have wondered, just out of curiosity, like where this comes from. And I've had a few conversations with people over time. And I've even gotten tried to get some intel on where there might be pockets of some birds. Like, I've always wanted to shoot a smoke phase wild turkey. If that's even, I don't know if smoke phase is actually a thing. We'll get into that. But I talked to somebody, one of the guys from NWTF, one of the regional biologists out in western Nebraska, and he's like, well, actually, there is a pocket out here where you'd be most likely, if you wanted to shoot one of those, probably this is where you'd want to go.
Yep.
And then I've had some white birds and some smoke phase birds by my family's farm in Minnesota.
Yeah.
And so I've seen all this, and I haven't like it's been a while since I've tried to ask like scientific questions about it. But when I first started seeing some of this, like when I first shot that bird in Nebraska many years ago, I wanted to know what it was. Like what is this, just like a fluke? Is it a color variation? Is there more to it? And so it really tripped my trigger when I found out about this project. And then it immediately got me thinking about some deeper level stuff with subspecies purity and hybridization and whatnot that I want to get into with you guys.
And that's why that curiosity is what started this.
Yep.
And I when Phil and I first talked about it, I was like, look, I'd like to understand these color variations, but we're late getting started, right? So if we focus our initial efforts on these colored odd plumage birds, that will give us time to ramp this up and expand it in 2026 to ultimately head where I have wanted to go since Karen Mock's work in 2002 was published, and that is a range-wide assessment of genetics in the wild turkey. And so the odd plumage birds gave us kind of the conduit to get there, and I knew turkey hunters are interested, like you just mentioned. They're interested in those colors.
So was it that as you guys were thinking through this, when you say the odd color birds are the conduit, are you saying that because people are intrigued by these odd colored birds, that it was like a gateway to, like, it's just a cool thing? You see an odd colored bird. I don't even know what do you even call, like, is there just what do you even call them? Like, I hear color phase, I hear this or that. Like, what's actual?
Well, historically,
what's proper?
we've thought that there were if you go back to the writings of like Lovett Williams, there were references to color phase wild turkeys, right? But no one's ever critically evaluated that. And so we've just kind of gone through the years. My own trapping crews have caught birds that appeared a smoke phase bird or a red phase bird, but we didn't really know if that was a thing or not. And so, yes, the conduit in my brain was, well, first, like Phil mentioned, we didn't know how this would even go. Like we talked amongst ourselves. We were like, let's plan for 75 samples. If we get 75 samples, we're probably doing pretty good. We blew by 75 in no time, and we turned down dozens and dozens of birds that I would have loved to have tested. We just didn't have the financial resources or the man or woman power to do it. So we took literally the oddest turkeys, and we're getting so many submissions of birds that looked similar to each other that I cherry picked out, 10 that looked like this, but there may have been 25 or 30 others submitted that looked the same that we just couldn't take. And at that point, we realized we can expand this. There's enough interest in this, just the odd plumage birds, that we can do better. We can expand it, and we can dig deeper.
Yeah, and onto that point, onto your point, your question is exactly right. It's, do you have a unicorn turkey, or is it just some bird out there, right, that got out of a gate, you shot, what is it signifying, right? What did you get? And that goes back to, like, the social media and everybody thinking that they know what they're talking about. Mm-hmm. And they're all professionals being like, yeah, that's that phase. That's what that is.
That's a farm turkey.
That's a farm turkey.
Yep.
And you know what? The only thing, as I tell my students and everybody else, that doesn't lie in life is your genetics. You could look like whatever you want, but your genetics doesn't lie, right? So we knew that foundationally we could get to the fundamental part of that turkey. And if we could do that, we can start asking that question: do you have a unicorn turkey or not? And what does that signify about the population? And so, obviously, we were under the hypothesis that all these weird-looking birds, these phases, are all what would be considered domestic or heritage. And as we continued to dig into that hole, it became quite complex and interesting.
Okay, so we're still kind of circling around the core of this thing, which I want you guys to help kind of define and identify more clearly for people. Yeah. So obviously, research dollars and support for something on a project like this, you don't have enough resources to just do something because it seems cool or because it's attractive to the public or people are intrigued by birds of different colors. Like, that's not a good enough case to go spend a bunch of money and do this kind of stuff. So aside from feeding that intrigue and getting that engagement from the public for something that they're naturally going to gravitate toward, because visually it's stimulating and it's intriguing, what's the point?
Yeah, we're actually going to talk about this at a seminar tomorrow. Josh, that's an excellent question, because what actually prompted this was we were collaborating together on turkey genetics questions before this. And we were seeing some signals that genetic diversity was lower than we would expect in some of the populations that I was studying. And we were seeing that through sampling eggshell membranes of hatched eggs. And in conversations with Phil, Zoom calls over and over and over, it became apparent to me, based on his ability to explain the genetics in dumb Mike terms, that we needed more information about these populations, that there were signals in some of the in the flocks that I was studying and my people were GPS tracking that caused me pause. And so that was in my mind as all of this was evolving. It was, but we have to get started. And like I told a large group yesterday, if we had come out of the gate and said, we want to study genetic diversity in wild turkeys, and we need $250,000 to do it, we were not going to be successful. If we came out of the gate after having the private conversations with the partners involved and telling them what we were starting to see, but we came out of the gate with a project that's engaging to the average turkey hunter, then we could build momentum while continuing to collect the background information to stimulate enough interest to expand this.
It's brilliant.
And that's the path we took.
Yeah. Like you were saying, when you were talking about the Osceolas, a lot of what we're about to do is ask the lore questions, right? There's like the mossy head turkeys in the south. I can't wait to deal with that one. Osceolas, how different are they from Easterns? We need the samples. We're getting the samples. We need more samples.
That's why Pete was where he was last year.
We already have a signature with that. And then on top of it, how different are Merriam's, Rios, Goulds, right? How different are each one of them? What's happening within the subspecies? But then, as you noted, places like Nebraska, California, Oregon, Washington, parts of Idaho, and Utah, where every single subspecies was dumped and just to see what was happening, right? During the translocation events and all that good stuff. What is that turkey?
What are they?
Yeah, what are they today? Did one of them make it? Did a couple of them make it? Are they just a bunch of hybrids? Are they what we will maybe consider the American turkey? What are they? Right? And what does that end on top of it? Because you did that, right? All these subspecies are subspecies because they were unique to a particular ecology. And what happens when you mix the genetics, you mix their ability to thrive in a particular ecology. Usually when you make a hybrid, that hybrid's not as good at life in either the parental ecologies, right? But maybe they're better, right? Maybe they're thriving for some odd reason. So in a good example, you go east of the Mississippi, and Mike can correct me, but some of the turkeys some of those turkey populations, those Easterns, are struggling. You go west of the Mississippi into those big land tracts where you potentially have a bunch of hybrids, those turkeys seem to be doing great. Is it the land size? Is it population size? Is it something else? Is it because you mix that genetics, you increase the genetic diversity and their ability to adapt to a more diverse set of ecologies?
And I get asked sometimes, like, how did all this happen? Yeah. And I'm doing a series this spring with James Earl Kinnemer, who was the director of conservation for NWTF during restoration. And for listeners that don't know this, the bottom line is when we were trying to restore wild turkeys, NWTF had a Target 2000 initiative, and the idea was to restore the wild turkey to all parts of its range by 2000, which necessitated putting turkeys in places where they were not historically present. And the scientific biological community really didn't know which subspecies would work best in some situations. And so you literally had situations where perhaps Rios were moved to lower elevation parts of a state, and Merriams were taken from other places and put in higher elevation areas of the state. And then you had situations where Easterns were brought in into those lower elevation areas as well. And so you had this mixing. The other thing that I've realized that I've learned, which I quite frankly was not aware of, and I'm embarrassed to say that, but reading into this and learning that states had populations of hybrid turkeys in their state that they used for restoration. Like there were already hybridized pockets of turkeys that were translocated all over the country. And in some situations, those birds were wild heritage turkey crosses. And so if the listener doesn't know that, a heritage turkey is a turkey that's the cross between a domestic turkey and a wild turkey. And they are then crossbred and line bred to produce odd plumage patterns. And so
and domestic is like your Costco turkey.
You're right. Right. And so these are the turkeys that live in people's yards that are in the back 40. They are pets, essentially. Some are raised for meat. And so during restoration, there's written documentation of states having heritage turkeys breed with wild local flocks. And then those turkeys were captured and translocated. And so during restoration, the listener needs to understand that the goal was to put turkeys everywhere. Yeah. And sometimes when the goal is to put something everywhere, you do what you need to do to get turkeys everywhere. And so that resulted in the range map that you see.
That's concerning.
If you look at the range map for the wild turkey, the eastern subspecies is entirely the eastern part of the United States. But when you get out west, things get western.
It's a hodgepodge.
Yeah, and that's something we're really interested in digging into.
Yeah, and we don't fault anybody. It's, everybody did what they did with the information they have, and now we've got new technologies and new techniques that we could start monitoring and maybe have a more information when we want to move things, right? If populations are struggling, and they're struggling because they're no longer connected, that dictates movement requirement of translocations. Now, what we're able to do actually is tell you with the genetics how many males and females you would have to move to artificially get that genetics back up and create an artificial connection between the populations. If that turkey's not going to cross the road, we got to move those turkeys potentially, or you lose both pockets.
It's spring, and when we're not in the studio, you'd better believe there's only one thing on our minds: chasing longbeards. That's why we're a proud partner of the National Wild Turkey Federation and fully support its mission, the conservation of the wild turkey and the preservation of our hunting heritage. The HuntStand podcast is also proud to partner with Savage. They offer our favorite tools for taking turkeys with the Renegade Semi-Auto and the 301 Single Shot. We're also excited to be running the new Ridge Runner series of turkey vests from our partners at Avian X. The Ridge Runner and Ridge Runner X are built for long days of running and gunning or sitting and waiting for stubborn gobblers. And remember, as a HuntStand Pro or Ultimate member, you can save major cash on some of the best turkey gear in the new HuntStand gear store. So check it out at huntstand.com.
The number of questions I have is my brain is exploding like fireworks.
You know why states did that? And this, I was asked this yesterday actually. Why did states do that? Like, why did they mix birds? You have to understand, if with very few exceptions, there are only a couple of states that manage turkeys based on subspecies.
Right.
Most states in the United States, if you look at their regulations, it's turkey. Turkey season, turkey management. And so from a state agency perspective, there's never been a history of, for the most part, in recognizing that there's differences in the subspecies. It's just turkeys.
Yep.
Okay, so I feel like we got a bunch of different things going on that could have different implications. So you got these hybrids that are wild turkey heritage crosses, some of which now you're telling me was done intentionally for some reason. And then you've probably got some that a gobbler just walks into a farmyard and breeds
Yep.
with a heritage.
Happens all the time.
And then you got wild.
Then you got wild hybridization.
And on top of all of that, when you do translocations, if you don't move enough individuals, you artificially reduce the genetics immediately, right? If you're moving only 20 birds and you accidentally take 10 siblings, you're really only moving 11 birds or something, genetically.
Okay.
So you're bottlenecking them every single time. So if you take a group and it grows, and you take a subset, you're just subsetting every single group. Just because the population grows doesn't mean that the genetics grows. And in fact, what you expect is as the population grows, even in an inbred population, once they hit a threshold where everybody kind of sucks at life, that's when you see a decline. You don't see an immediate decline, you see a steady decline. You could imagine as going from 6 eggs to 5.75, 5.5, 5.25, 5, right? That decline. And then eventually you hit 3 and you're like, oh, where's my turkeys?
And if you go back and look at that is a beautiful point. If you go back and look at translocation records, which are in my office, all of them, we moved 12 birds, 15 birds, 21 birds, 3 jakes, 10 hens, we were single capture events of a flock were used in translocation for the most part. So literally an agency biologist would shoot a net over a winter flock. Let's say it's 10 hens. Very likely, what Phil just said, there are siblings in that flock. So 10 hens were not moved genetically. Maybe 6 were.
Right.
And they were moved into a pocket and released. And so just by default, what we were doing creates the situation Phil just described.
And that's why it's more complex than I imagined, and definitely more complex than all my waterfowl work, just because turkeys don't move like ducks do, right? We have this history of translocations. We have a history of heritage putting on the landscape. We have a history of people currently, directly or indirectly adding more heritage into populations. All of that creates different signatures and unique situations almost state by state. And that is the rabbit hole we just dug into.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to tie a bow on this thing right now because there's more that I want to talk about. But before I forget it, are there concerns with, number one, something that has always kind of, I don't know if bothered me is the right way to put it, but are there concerns with trying to preserve the purity of the subspecies?
That's a question agencies are going to have to ask themselves. And I think there are some agencies, and I'm not going to name any, that I know 100% the answer is no. They are concerned with a sustainable wild turkey population in their state. They're not concerned at the administrative level with what they are. But there are some states that at least from the biological staff, would say, yes, we are. We are concerned with the genetic, with the integrity of the subspecies itself.
And the beauty is that what we can provide is the information that they require to make those decisions.
Right.
Okay,
right? We can say, this is what you have. These populations over here are highly inbred and are disconnected. And based on our models, you got to move population B and 5 hens and 5 toms from population B and population C into D, and you'll create an artificial connection between them. And you have to do this every 2 years or 3 years or whatever it is that we find out that can maintain it, and that at least gives them
direction.
Yeah.
Information.
The information required to make the best decision that they can with the resources that they have.
All right, I want to reapproach those answers from you guys without you punting it to saying they ultimately get to make the decision. At this stage,
that's not a punt.
At this stage, what do you guys think? Do you, based on what you know right now, or even just there can be 2 categories: what you know right now, based off of data and the implications on the health of these populations. And then on the personal side, as a turkey hunter.
Yeah.
Do you think it is probably important to try to preserve the integrity of these subspecies?
Well, I mean, we see clearly if you plot out the samples that we have a figure showing this clearly, that genetically the subspecies do cluster separately. So there are genetic differences amongst the subspecies for the most part. So yes, I think it is important from the species ecology perspective, because like Phil mentioned, each subspecies is adapted to where it's supposed to be, and I see importance in that. There's a reason that the Merriam's wild turkey lived historically in the places that it called home. There's a reason that Rio Grandes lived in the southern plains, because they can tolerate those conditions. There's a reason that Meleagris gallopavos sylvestris, the eastern wild turkey, there's a reason that they dominate forested landscapes in North America, because that's what they're adapted to do. Their mating system is a little different than the other subspecies. They gobble to maintain dominance and keep tabs with each other. They can't see each other like the other subspecies. And so, yes, I think from a turkey ecology science perspective, yes, there is importance.
Yeah, I mean, Eastern is basically an American black duck. It's adapted to boreal forests, right? A Rio is much like a mallard, adapted to that open kind of areas. So they are, and one of the things that we will be studying once we have enough samples of all the subspecies and we can say, yeah, that's actually representing a Merriam's and not a hybrid or something else, we can start asking the question, because we have the locations of all of them, what genetics explains their ecology, right? So basically asking the cancer question, which is, you are here, yes or no, and we can find genes that are associated and see what they're linked to, right? What are they expressing? Some sort of fat content, or their ability to move, or whatever it is that they're tied into. And so by building out this data set, we can ask many, many more questions like that. Like, does it matter, right? Are they all just turkeys and it's a random life effect? Or is there something special about them that we need to look at it?
Think about the Merriam subspecies. If you've ever hunted them, if you're not aware of this, unlike the other subspecies, they leave their winter range and they travel sometimes extraordinary distances to their spring ranges. Well, if you think about a mountain bird and an elevational kind of gradient, they have to do that, right? So what is it about the Merriam subspecies genetically that predisposes them to being able to do that? And how is that different from the other subspecies?
Yeah, does that explain are Merriams better at maintaining connectivity from mountain range to mountain range because they do that?
Right.
Versus the other birds that we put a Rio or an Eastern somewhere that don't know how to go down and up a mountain, and then they just, they
sit there.
They sit there, and the population balloons, and then eventually it slowly decays again because of that whole inbreeding situation.
Yeah, so obviously there's a reason there are subspecies. There's a reason God has these subspecies so that they can live where they live. I mean, that's just what it is. This is not scientific, so maybe you can help me break this down, but it appears to me that Easterns are maybe the most unlikely to be influenced or affected by hybridization. Like, if you pictured a wave of hybridization closing in, it feels to me like they kind of have a pretty solid anchor. It feels to me like Rios do as well. Osceolas feels pretty dicey. And then on Merriam's, I have to ask you as part of this question, I've had this conversation with so many people, including the next guest who will be coming here in a little while, who has taken perhaps more Grand Slams than anybody. And he believes that there maybe isn't an unhybridized Merriam's population anywhere anymore. What do you guys? There are several questions baked into that, but let's take that one first.
If you look historically, the simple answer to that is, if you look historically at the historic range maps that were described many, many, many decades ago, where turkeys occurred naturally, the Merriam subspecies was isolated, entirely isolated from other subspecies. So the Merriam subspecies has historically been its own thing, right? What happened during restoration is that Merriams from the core of their range, which was primarily Colorado, were translocated to other parts of western North America. So if you look historically, Easterns and Rios, there were zones of where those subspecies either met or got close to meeting. There's never been any separation between the Eastern subspecies and what's called the Osceola subspecies. There's never been any separation. There's been separation from Rios and Goulds because Goulds are isolated to high elevation mountains in the Sierra Madres and elsewhere. And so I would counter that suggestion with the recognition that historically the Merriam subspecies was isolated, as were other subspecies.
So historically, but isn't it true that there has been like an encroaching wave of hybridization? I mean,
well, it's all man-made. The places that are all hybridization is man-made because you took Merriams and Rios and put them in a single location.
Right.
And a tom's going to do its thing. Like, in every species that is put into a single location, and if that's the turkey they've got, that's the turkey they've got, that they can survive it. But there's no doubt in my mind, and we already have some results for that, but we just don't have enough samples. There are Merriams on the landscape. We just need to find them, right? So we just don't have the sample sizes. Now, to your point about the Easterns, in fact, I would suggest that the Easterns are in more trouble than the Western groups.
really?
I think that their isolation, I think that their translocation and whatever is happening on the landscape with people putting heritage birds out is causing more concern for me. Mike can say something else.
What listeners need to understand too about the restoration activities for the Eastern subspecies were very different than restoration activities for out west. Out west, there was a lot of intentional mixing. In the East, there was a lot of situations where there were certain states that did not bring any turkeys from outside of their state. They conducted what's called serial translocations, where they went back to the same source populations within their state. South Carolina is an example, New York's another, where they went back to the same places and moved turkeys from those sources all over the state. And so by default, restoration in those states was using a smaller source pool than was going out west. And so then you look at another state, there were other states in the Eastern subspecies range that used 6 states for source population. So they literally grabbed turkeys from all over Eastern North America and put those birds out. And so to Phil's point, just by default, some of the Eastern populations, even as restoration was ongoing, were already being genetically undermined, if you will, because the sources were simple. And they were, in some cases, only a few flocks that were being used to populate most of the counties in the state.
And on top of it, if I'm not wrong, most of the states were repopulated initially with PA birds, right? Those were like some of the last ones, plus maybe these mossy head birds in the southeast.
Yeah, a lot came from Pennsylvania, and then in the deep south, there were several places, Francis Berry National Forest, the Savannah Riverside area. There were places where some of the mountain ranges in the south where turkeys kind of held on and were isolated. Those birds went everywhere.
Yeah, I believe like the Ozarks as well in Missouri, right?
Yeah, you had the Ozarks, you had Talladega National Forest, you had places where turkeys could stay away from us and survive.
Yeah, they didn't get just gunned down during market hunting years.
So back to this Merriam's thing. I think first of all, we probably should have done this earlier, but when we use the term pure, what constitutes that? Is it a percentage? Is it a dominant percentage?
Yeah. So ancestrally, they're identified to currently the way we're just doing is wild versus non-wild, right? When we're doing our certificates, so it's going to be 100% wild or it's not. or 100% heritage, or it's not, right? And anything in between is a form of hybrid. We don't want to call the wild side yet, and we don't want to call the heritage side yet because we don't have enough reference samples. Again, it's very much like 23andMe, or if you ever sent your dog pedigree to whatever, you need a bunch of references that you can compare to. If you don't have all your references, like if I didn't have any lab in there, I couldn't really tell you had a lab. I would just be like, it's a dog. It's not a wolf, right? I need the references, and unfortunately, turkeys, there's so many heritage breeds that people have created, and there's so much dynamic happening even in a single state that we almost need state-by-state reference samples to be like, oh, that's a Great Lakes bird, or that's a Southeast bird, or that's a Northeast bird, or that is a Merriam's, or that is a Rio. So we're trying to do that.
But you could definitively say right now, if you got a sample in from what somebody thought was a Merriam's, you could test that and definitively say yes or no, it's not?
Yeah, I can. I'd like to get our sample sizes bigger before we all agree that we can go to the subspecies level. But in general, yeah, all the subspecies, again, Osceolas, we need more samples, but all of the other subspecies create their own genetic lineage. And once I have that, once there's a genetic signature for each one, I can always reference against them.
You can clearly see that, like, and when you hear reference sample, basically you need comparisons, right? So we need, and that's why we're expanding Wild Turkey DNA this year. We need samples from every state, and we need a broad geographic distribution of samples from within that state. And that will allow us, to Phil's point, that will allow him to really nail down the subspecies delineation, because right now what we're looking at is we got a bunch of reference samples, but they're in pocket. Like, we got a bunch of turkeys we caught in Nebraska. We got a bunch of turkeys caught in North Dakota. We got all the easterns that my folks have put their hands on for years. But there's pockets that we don't have any data in. And so as we continue to populate our data set, it will allow Phil to say this is X% Merriam's, X% Rio. This is 100% Merriam, or whatever the scenario
It's
is.
exactly the same thing as humans, right? I couldn't tell you have German in you if I didn't have any true German ancestry in my reference set, right? Otherwise it'd be Eastern European or whatever it is, the best that I have. So right now the problem lies when we get a bird out of a state I don't have any other samples for. My question is always, is it a mix because I don't have that state's bird and it doesn't know what to do with it, or is it real? And so I can still call that bird if it's got heritage or no heritage, or domestic or no domestic. But for me to say, that is truly a Rio or truly a Rio Merriam's, I can't do that for a lot of states. Because what it's going to do is say, there's some weird thing in its genetics. It's not heritage, so it's just going to split it amongst the things that I have the closest relation to. And then, is that real or not? So for us to tell somebody, oh, yeah, that's a Rio Merriam's, maybe in a year, where it says, would you like to reassess your ancestry? I'd be like, oh, no, that's just a Rio that's specific to Utah, because that's a signature for Utah, or something like that, right? It was splitting it because I didn't have any Utah in the reference set.
So then, in theory, there's a reason I'm fixated on this Merriam's thing, and you guys.
I was going to ask, but go on.
Well, it's just
the one bird we have the fewest samples for.
It just feels to me, and just it seems like. It feels like all of the Merriam's have been hybridized. That's just what it feels like to me. And you guys are saying that that's probably not true, but
those are feelings. You could have them.
Well, if you look at restoration, so like for instance, Colorado, there are states that had subspecies within them that did not translocate birds into. In other words, there were mountain ranges where Merriam's historically occurred, that translocation did not occur to that spot.
Yeah.
So to Phil's point, as we dig deeper and deeper and deeper, he said it, we will find them. We just haven't found them yet. In other words, there are pockets of pure subspecies. We just haven't gotten a sample from there yet.
And and on to that point, if anybody wants their next slam to be correct, you'll have to send us a tongue.
Yeah.
That's part of what I'm getting to here. I feel like this could really shake things up for people who are.
Or we add 50 birds to the slam. The Utah bird.
Oh,
Yeah.
that,
The
and that
Idaho bird.
That will be a thing.
Yeah. Then the U.S. Super Slam is
U.S. Super
that's
Slam.
required to get the.
Do we have a Greenland bird yet?
Yeah. We ain't even going there. Yeah.
So, yeah, that's
The look on your face right now is what I wake
Yeah.
up with every morning. It's like my wheels are spinning in 9,000 directions, and I'm texting him, and he's busy as hell, and he's texting back, and then I'm emailing, and then I'm like, so what are you saying? I'm not saying anything. I don't know yet. I'm like, damn it, I want an answer.
now you know how it feels.
Yeah,
How many
I
times have
want
you had to say
know.
that to the layman?
Yeah, and that's I
Yep.
literally have called him and said, okay, dude, I want a yes or a no, and his response is maybe.
now I'm so glad that you have to feel that because
I think my first response is I need people.
I need more money and I need people. Yeah, it's maddening, and I want
It
to know
is.
today.
Yeah,
but
you
we're
got
not
to
there
understand. We're running 2,000 plus samples of duck DNA and goose, and then we're working on all the other state agency stuff, including sheep now and other things. So it's a constant thing, right? And now with turkeys, we're basically year round. We've got a season that we've got people interested in stuff, and so. Yeah, it's not, and then my university still wants me to teach and do that university stuff. It's constant, just trying to catch up. But we're doing our best. We're still turning things around in a month or two for the things I'm sure about. Everything else, just because turkey DNA started with very little as far as the sampling sizes go. Especially now, knowing what we know, it's just not sufficient enough to answer the question. I mean, we've got some birds out of New Zealand. We're hoping to get some birds out of Hawaii. What the heck is that? Apparently we sent birds to Germany. I don't know what the hell that is now. What is it that's on the landscape? And then rewriting what is wild.
And if you're a hunter listening to this that has submitted a sample and you haven't gotten test results back,
that's one of those I don't know.
And the reason is because as we add data to this database, the call changes. In other words, our inference about what that bird is changes. And that causes us pause because in the public eye, you have one opportunity. And if you fail, you lose credibility. And I've worked a long time to establish credibility. And so I contact these hunters. I interact with them. I'm like, just hang with us. If you're one of those hunters, it's a bird that is very unique. It's either white, it's smoke colored, it's something very, very unique. And we don't want to make the call until we are 100% positive that we are correct. Because we don't want to retract and say we got it wrong, because that's how you lose credibility in the scientific world.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, to that point, like I sort of noted too, as we got like a couple samples from Ohio and from, some of the Great Lakes, all of a sudden there's this other signature I pick up where I'm like, that looks like a Great Lakes signature thing, right? And then like a couple birds out of Tennessee sort of look like this Great Lakes plus the Southeast. I can say they're wild, but I don't know what that signature is. So that's the whole thing. We just don't have the map completed.
So back to the Merriam's fixation real quick. Okay.
I want to know. Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's
love
just
hunting.
Out of all subspecies.
Yeah.
so. You're telling me if I'm getting this right, with Merriam's specifically, you said there are pockets where there was no translocation that happened. So you're telling me that the preservation of that subspecies is by chance? because there was no translocation in pockets?
I think in some cases the answer to that's going to be yes. I
That's
think in other
wild.
cases you just had situations where, again, restoration was focused on, in many states, on the wild turkey. And we didn't, I wasn't involved in it, but the scientific community just didn't know
Yeah.
what would stick in some of these states. And where you had pockets of turkeys that were doing fine, well, they didn't need translocation efforts, right? Those birds were taken and put elsewhere, not vice versa. So there were places that did not get the introduction of unique genetic material from translocations. That's my point. As we conduct this expanded sampling, we will find those areas. We will find those pockets that didn't receive turkeys from elsewhere. We just don't know where those pockets are right now.
And we will be happy to partner with HuntStand to create those maps and sell it at $4.99.
I was gonna say you can charge a pretty penny for those GPS coordinates when you're like, oh, this is the only pocket of pure Miriams right here in Colorado.
So to his point,
100 grand.
I mean, like, in all honesty, just because birds were moved doesn't mean they hybridized, right? To the point of, like, we didn't know what was going to take. It doesn't. So that means maybe all the Rios and the Easterns died out and the Miriams took in one spot, but in another spot the Miriams and the Easterns died out, so the Rios took on. Right, we don't know what's there, like especially like California, where they just put everybody, or Washington, like they have a little tiny pocket of presumed Easterns, but they put all of them there and been like, good luck.
And we see that all the time.
We don't know
in ongoing restoration efforts in East Texas. We GPS marked a bunch of birds years ago, probably 10 years ago now, that came from a several source populations. Some came from Iowa, some came from West Virginia, some came from Missouri. The West Virginia, Missouri birds were gone before breeding season ever got going really good. And there were just a few of each. Those birds all died out. And so only the Iowa birds persisted in that particular translocation
right.
effort.
So there is something to the bird's ability to adapt to that ecology, right? If it comes from a similar ecology, it'll more likely than not make it, versus something that is completely like, I don't know where I am anymore, won't, right? So the question is what did persist and what do we have now? And then once we know that, we can start building the data sets for the states themselves and be like, this is what you have, these are your problem children, these are the things you can do.
I have a really interesting anecdote that I'll share, and then we can get to wrapping this thing up because I know you guys got to get going. But there's a place I hunt in eastern Nebraska along the Missouri River where it's a distinct dividing line between habitat types, where you would, in your head, you would imagine it makes sense. Like the eastern part of this place where I hunt is all big hardwood ridges on the Missouri River, and then the town is the dividing line, and then beyond that, it's like prairie and Cottonwood Creek bottoms and more what we would consider more classic Merriam's country. So they're all hybrids, but
Presumed.
okay, presume. I can tell you they all look like dirty birds,
Yeah.
but literally that dividing line between those habitat types it's like the main road that goes through that town.
Yeah.
And even though it's literally a stone's throw, on the east side of that road, you look at the flocks, and usually when we're hunting them, they're still in wintering flocks, so you get to really see a big sample, at least visually. And the birds east of that town are predominantly much more dark and look more eastern, and the birds west of town, I mean, I'm talking a stone's throw, have much more white in them.
Yeah.
Presumably Merriam's. And it's like, that blows my mind, because it's like literally you could throw a football across the train tracks and like the line feels that distinct.
Yeah, and I was talking about this yesterday with another group, a big group. Turkeys, by default, lend themselves to that situation because they have a defined social structure and they do not disperse that far. And so just the way their dominance hierarchies work out, the fact that their flocks are very discrete, They go to the same areas every year to breed. They winter in the same areas every year. Just their ecology kind of lends itself to, I'm not going to just cross the railroad tracks, right? I've been doing this for generations, and I think that bears out in some of what you see, because they have a very strong fidelity to where they go, and they've been doing it for generations. Just like the Merriams. I mean, when you go out west, the birds go to the same wintering areas every single year. They go to the same breeding ranges every single year, and there's no incentive to break that, right? So you're generationally following the generation ahead of you, and I think part of that bears out just kind of naturally in the turkey world.
And the place that you're hunting, that area would be extremely ideal to get samples out of and be like, what the heck is that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Might be able to help you out in a couple weeks.
I hope so.
I just had this hilarious cartoon visualization when you said that of one turkey standing on one side of those train tracks and another one on the other, giving each other the stink eye, saying, "You stay on your side of the tracks."
That's right.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. And to this entire point, you were talking about the plumages that are there. I mean, an underlying question of all of this is how often and what does it mean when you do have a smoke phase or a white bird or a black bird or a red bird? What does that mean to the flock, right? And how do you get that? How do you get those plumages genetically? Is that a heritage thing, right? Is that because of hybridization? Is it naturally occurring? If so, like, how often do you have it? And what does it mean if you see a lot of them? Like if you see a lot of white birds in your flock, what does that mean about your flock?
Absolutely.
Those are definitely underlying questions there. It's like, and the mechanism to how many ways can you basically turn white or red or black? Is it the same thing that in a white bird that's called a Merriam's, a white bird that's a heritage, a white bird that's domestic? How are they all the same mechanisms, or is it something different?
So many questions, but we're gonna wrap this thing up, and we'll close it with this. What can listeners and viewers of this podcast do to support what you guys are working on? What's the easiest way to get involved?
Yeah, so if you're interested in wild turkey DNA, you can go to wildturkeydna.com. That website has all the results we've posted so far. We have not set up a donation mechanism through that website as of yet, but I think we're going to head there at some point. We are realizing that we need more information, and more information costs more money. And so if you're interested in the project, that's where you can find information. You can go to wildturkeylab.com. That's my website that also has links to Wild Turkey DNA. You can follow us on social media. Wild Turkey DNA has an Instagram page, Facebook page. We're on X. And you can obviously reach out to either one of us, and we can offer you information as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Same thing. Instagram at Lavretsky Lab. You can, honestly, those are my students, though. I suck at this job. You can, I don't even remember my own lab website, but you could just find, Lavretsky, Dr. Phil, Ducks. You could find me. Get in touch with me any which way you can, and I'm always here, especially for the hunters, to answer their questions, to make whatever they want to happen.
And I can 100% tell you, the young lady that monitors the Instagram page for Wild Turkey DNA, she does not respond to a message. She is 100% responsive to messages, and if she doesn't know the answer, she sends it to me or to Phil, and we provide the hunter the answer. So if you're interested in that, message us. I mean, I think a lot of people, if they follow me on social media, they know how to find me on Wild Turkey Doc is my accounts. But if you're specifically targeting the DNA work, if you reach out to Wild Turkey DNA's socials, we will respond to you.
Sweet.
Absolutely.
Well, I'll also drop some links down in the description / show notes for the podcast. Phil and Mike, this has been awesome. I wish we could sit here all day and crack a six-pack and talk about wild turkeys. And I mean, you can see I have a lot of questions, and we're going to have to do this again sometime.
Absolutely. Let's do
Absolutely.
it. Yeah, let's have a follow-up.
Heck yeah. So this is the HuntStand podcast, coming at you with another one from the National Wild Turkey Federation Convention and Sports Show in Nashville. We'll see you on the next one.